All right, here we are with another one of the Tales from the Mile of Gold, and today we have six-time Stanley Cup winner Larry Hillman with us. It's a pleasure, Larry. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Yes.
I guess a good starting point for our conversation today would be the last time we saw each other, which was at the Holy Name Irish reunion.
Yes.
This past summer.
Yeah, that was a wonderful occasion. I can't believe that all the work that went into it, you know, it was just amazing. I've been to a lot of functions, and this one was really one of the best I've been to.
It was a wonderful night. I was, part of my duties, I had to be there for a while, but I had a couple other stops that evening, so I wasn't there for the entire night, but I had a blast. Talking to people afterwards, it was one of the highlights of the reunion. And they're going to be talking about your speech for years.
Actually, my speech was very simple. Actually, all I wanted to do, I thought I realized that nobody was going to thank Keith Murray because he was the master
of ceremonies
so
and the chief organizer.
That's realistically what I wanted to do because he's a good friend of mine, him and Sharon, and so I thought, well, when they asked, has anybody else got anything to say? I said, well, I'd just like to go up and just say, and then I think, well, I guess I'll ramble off.
While I'm here.
While I'm here, well, I just, to thank the town and city of Kirkland Lake for the wonderful reception that they given Dickie and the players that came.
And it was wonderful to see you guys come back, and I don't know how many people who will view this will know that there was a period of time where you'd pop into the radio station or we'd talk to you on the phone on a halfway regular basis. And to me, that's one of the highlights of my radio career, getting to talk to guys that I grew up watching, winning Stanley Cups, standing on St. Catherine Street, or in Montreal, or standing in St. Catherine Street, watching you in the Stanley Cup parade, and then years later, here I am sitting talking to you. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, the one thing that I realized about Montreal, I was down there by myself. My family was back in Vineland, in the St. Catharines, Niagara area, because I came from Minnesota, and I didn't get located. I stayed with Dickie Duff for a couple months there. Then a couple of friends that he knew moved out of a high rise, and I took it over for the remaining time. But the one thing that was really unique is, since I was single, we had to put in time, so back then there was still Eaton's and Simpsons, you know.
Yeah.
So you'd go downtown, walk through Eaton's or Simpsons, and hello, Mr. Hillman. You wouldn't know these people, but they knew you.
They knew you. You were a rock star.
If you were a Montreal Canadian, it didn't matter if you were a bench warmer or the star. They knew you.
They knew you. They recognized you everywhere you went.
And they related to you, So
that's got to be a pretty cool feeling too, right?
Yeah,
Walking around and
was
having
nice.
people acknowledge you.
And then I'd go with Dickie for supper, and we'd go get to a fancy restaurant or a restaurant, and you get the kisses on both sides.
Exactly. Yeah, you get to do the Quebec way.
Yeah,
both
we got the double. So that was kind of interesting.
Now, back in the day, did you have to pay for your meals?
Yes, we're not.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, on the road, but we didn't mind that. Though our meal money wasn't too high.
I know that. And yet there were guys that would squirrel away. I've heard stories of guys that would squirrel away meal money. How'd they survive?
Yeah, well, our salaries were pretty low, comparable. We all know what today's millionaire players are. I held out over $500, which came out to $200 was going for income tax, so it was $300.
So it was $300.
So I held out for 24 days and got fined $2,400, $100 a day. But to tell you
it was the principle, though, right?
The principle. I won 62, 63, 64, and then 65, I was captain of Rochester Americans. That's when Don Cherry was our bench warmer behind me.
Yeah.
That's why he knew all about hockey. He watched us play all the time.
He watched you guys play. You guys taught him.
So I won 4 cups there, and then I won in 67, and I had already won one in 55 with Detroit.
With Detroit.
So with 6 cups behind me, I was trying to make $20,000, and I went 21, they went 19, and then they come up 500 and stayed there for the whole training camp. When I come in for the opening, the schedule there, they said, "Are you going to sign?" I said, "Yes, for 20,000, I'm not going to sign." So told the trainer to put my equipment in storage and buy me $100 a day for 24 days. And then I finally Joe Crozier phoned me and said that come on down to Rochester, who he was the general manager and coach when we won the Calder Cup. And he said, if you come down here for a week or 10 days and you go back up to the big club. And I said, well, if you pay half my fine, I'll come, because I didn't want to sign with Imlach. And I was buying in 9 acres in the St. Catharines, Niagara area.
Okay.
And I knew without signing I wouldn't be able to buy it. So I said, you know, pay me my $1,200 and I'll come down. So I came down and went into Joe's office and he says, well, you're in a 1/3 income tax bracket and give me 8 $100 bills.
Oh, no.
So that's how I got signed with Toronto for the last. But
what a great story.
But to finish off the story, people, they said I put the Hillman hex on the Leafs, and this was quite the media thing for years and years. And somebody had 35 years said, Larry, it's 35 years. Isn't that long enough? And I said, 50 is a nice round figure. So I left it at 50, and when 50 came around, I ended up taking him off, and Shanahan was the big CO there. And we were at the outdoor game, and, excuse me, and then we were over to the Hockey Hall of Fame for a dinner there. We were there for the whole weekend, and there was 9 of us players and our wives, and Shanahan come to congratulate us, and then he come and sat down alongside Davy Keehan and I there, and just before this come about the Hillman Hex in the 50 years, one of the sports writers from Toronto called me and said, you know, are you taking the hex off? And I said, yes, I took it off. I at this dinner, Shanahan came over and sat down, and what the sports writer was really asking me was, what did I think of Davey getting a statue? And I said, great, he's one of my favorite players, and he's up from our same area, we're on Miranda. And I said, you know, that's great, but the sports writer took a second breath and said, well, how about the Hillman Hex? Are you taking that off? And I said, yes, I officially shook hands with Shanahan, and because he read in the paper, the Saturday Star, the sports page, there was hardly anything about Keon with the statue.
It was all about the Hex?
It was Hillman and the Hex. So anyway, I told Brendan that it was taken off, and you start making the playoffs, which they did first round against Boston.
So now it's their own fault. There's no Hex
So
involved.
no Hex, and the thing about it, I had a hip replacement 2 years later, and Shanahan had called my wife, and I was in the hospital, and he talked to her and wanted to know all about my family and up in Kirkland Lake and all this. And when he was finished, he says, well, I want to let you know that the board of directors, Bell and Rogers, have issued a check for the $2,400 plus interest.
Oh, wow.
So
how cool is that?
That was
how cool
from
is that?
He said, we look back at your record and all that, and they don't think the Maple Leafs treated you fairly.
Wow.
On that, and we want to, you know.
I know Brendan and his regime have tried to correct a lot of perceived mistakes over the years.
Like I say, we got the rings that we never would have got.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, because that's a pretty cool story too. Best trivia question I know about you is, you have a record that will never, ever, ever be broken, because they'll never change the rules over this.
Yeah.
And that is, Larry Hillman is the youngest player ever to have his name engraved on the Stanley Cup. 18 years and 2 months. And why it's a record to last forever, you got to be at least 18 September 15th to play in the NHL. So by the time you get through the season and playoffs, you're 19 years old.
Yes. So that's a nice
so
record.
There's an honor they will never, ever take away
I
from
mean,
you.
that's a nice record to have. And even at that the Holy Name reunion there, I bought one of the framed pictures of Ted Lindsay and Johnny Bauer. And the reason I bought that is because Ted Lindsay was from Kirkland Lake, and he was sort of who we looked up to, Dickie and Ralphie and I growing up. And then Johnny, naturally, I played with the 4 Stanley Cups with him, and they were the 2 in the picture. So it was one of the first ones I won the Stanley Cup, and
one of the last.
And one of the last, except for the Montreal one with Vachon and Worsley.
So 1955, you're 18 years old. You're with the Detroit Red Wings. Now, it was your second year with the Wings, right?
No, it was the first year.
It was the first year with the Wings?
If you can imagine, I left Kirkland Lake out of elementary school, grade 8, and went 600 miles to Windsor to play junior A hockey
For the Spits.
for the Spitfires. And we played one year there, and then they changed the franchise to Hamilton.
Okay.
So I was 2 years in Hamilton, and in the third year, I was captain of the Hamilton. So I played in my 15th in Windsor, my 16th, and my 17th. I was in my 17th year that I got called up to Detroit. And I came up and played 6 games, and they had to turn me pro. And then we won the cup.
Wow.
So that was, amazing when you think somebody from a public school
Exactly.
would be playing with the junior A team. But I moved up so quickly.
So did you realize at the time what you were doing, or were you just kind of going with the flow as a 17, 18-year-old?
I just, the fact that Lindsay was from here, that helped.
Yeah, that was a comfort zone.
And then the great hockey players that they had on Detroit, naturally they had Gordy, but a fellow like Red Kelly, who I played alongside of sometime, and Red, him and Jean Bellevue are in a class, and Johnny Bauer himself.
Yeah, they're special.
And to play with Red and that, and Marcel Pronovo at the time, so it was easy to make the transition. The strange part of it is one of my roommates was Bob Golden. I think he was about 34, so he was about twice my age. So
old enough to be your dad.
Yeah, it was grandfather and son here.
So how were you treated in the room?
Well,
Were you the kid, or were you one of the gang?
Like back in the old days, they was lucky if 1 or 2 players ever made the lineup.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like an influx. So yeah, they all welcomed you, and so it was. And then they had won the cup a few years in a row, Detroit. So they were a powerhouse, and so that's another thing. I was fortunate. I was with Detroit when they were the powerhouse. Then I'm with Toronto when they're the powerhouse, and I'm with Montreal when they're the powerhouse. But they're always the powerhouse back then. But I was fortunate. I of the 6 original teams, I probably played with the 3 best.
Yeah, exactly. And you were a contributor, big time contributor.
And then the fact that the 3 teams I played with, the player personnel were the top. Like when you played with Gordie Howe and Sawchuk and players like that. And then when you play with Mihaljevic and Horton and Bauer,
That's as good as it gets.
And then in Montreal, you're with Jean Bellevue and Henry Richard, and it was such a unique.
Well, you're one of the guys you can walk through the Hall of Fame and say, "Yeah, I played with him. I played with him. I played with him. I played with him. I played with him."
I probably played with more players or no more players than anybody else. Because I did move around. It's amazing. Everybody thought I got traded lots, which I did, so to a certain extent. But in that time, I was actually 9 or 10 years with Imlach. So I came back 2 years with him in Buffalo, though he had a heart attack and Joe Crozier took over. But I was under Imlach's, and he brought me back from L.A. One of the big reasons when he called me when I went up to the office in L.A. and said that he's bringing me back sort of as a veteran, but mainly to some extent to make sure that Perreault, Martin, and Robert wouldn't get led astray, because when you expand and you can only get 12 hockey players from the original 6, you've got to pick up 6 more to fill in. And the 6 more you pick up to fill in, they're sometimes from the American League or the Central League. And some of them are party goers because they never could make the NHL, so they're living the life of what they figure they're not going to get any better. So he wanted to make sure that they didn't get led astray. And then the following year, he brings in Tim Horton.
So you came in as a mentor for them.
Yeah, I was the veteran, because there was probably the majority of them were 8 to 10 years younger than me.
Wow.
And then they brought Horton in.
All right, so that ring, Larry, there's quite the story behind this ring. First of all, before we get to this ring, Toronto Maple Leaf ring, I have a question. 1955, you win the Stanley Cup with Detroit. Did they give you rings then?
No, they give us a wristwatch with red wings and 2 pucks on the 3 and the 9.
So when did rings become the thing? Probably your time with the Leafs, maybe?
It was probably in the 60s, because I know Bobby Hall and my brother Wayne won in 61.
61, yeah.
They got rings.
Okay,
And,
okay. So it's probably 60, 61,
yeah,
somewhere in
yeah. And Bobby, I get this this magazine from which a lot of hockey players had sold some of their memorabilia there. But anyway, Bobby Hall's ring from Chicago went for $83,000
Wow.
on that.
Wow. So, Toronto Maple Leafs, you win in 62, 63, and 64. Then you win again in 67. Now, they're giving out rings, as we've just found out, for Stanley Cup winners. So you should have got 1967, or say the beginning of the 68 season, 68-69 season, when they had the banner ceremony and the ring ceremony, you should have been collecting your 4th ring from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's how we all assumed that was.
Okay, now, at that time, how many rings did you actually have?
I just had the one from the Maple Leafs, but should I tell a story about it?
Yeah, tell the story, because this
Well,
is, I've never heard this before, and it boggles my mind.
Yeah. Well, back then, you don't want to use the word cheap, but they were
Frugal.
Frugal or thrifty.
Yes.
They gave us a one ring with a quarter diamond in it.
Okay, so that was 62.
62.
Okay.
And when we wanted in 63, they asked for our ring back, and they put a half a diamond in it.
Okay, so they upgraded the
They
ring.
upgraded. So then we give it back in 64, and they upgraded to three-quarters.
Three-quarter diamond.
So by the time 67 rolled around, we gave it back again, and we got a full carat.
So, I mean, so you got the full carat,
Yes,
but you still got ripped off because you should have had 4 rings.
yes.
Now, years later, now the Maple Leafs were ripped for decades because of the way they did things. Thrifty, we'll call it.
No, it was the Hillman Hex.
So, we come to recent times, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, Brendan Shanahan running the operation. Brendan Shanahan and his organization have tried to make right a lot of things that were perceived wrong back in the day. What did they do for you guys re the rings?
Well, Shanahan, after we, I think, complained, we started. Toronto Maple Leafs didn't bring us back till about the 40th anniversary that we ever heard from them, and other businesses were bringing us back and going to banquets with them and all that. And they would ask us, about your rings. And I said, well, we only have the one ring. And so it'd become, we'd start asking the Leafs, why don't we get the other rings for the years we won? And it turned out to be that when Shanahan came on board, he definitely felt that every Maple Leaf should have got a ring.
Yeah.
So he made it to the board there that we all got additional rings for every year that we played there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. That is so cool. And I'm glad that happened because...
And can I tell you one more story about
Certainly.
Detroit Red Wings? Like, we got the watch, but when they won in 2008, when Shanahan played for them, about, this is going back, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, 2008, Mike Ilitch and his wife Maria, they said that anybody that won a Stanley Cup with Detroit deserves a ring. So we got the identical 2008 ring with about 100 diamonds in it.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and so and they wrote a little note in as fans of hockey, not as owner of the Red Wings or the Tigers.
Okay.
So, and we didn't know this was coming. My mother was in a nursing home, and I used to go up every day, and we had this note on the door that CP or whatever had come by, UPS, I guess, and left a note, and we weren't there. And then I didn't get going the next day till later, and they came by, and we got this little box, and it was, I think, $58.20 to send it from Detroit. And then there was this little card in it, and I opened it up, and there was the ring. And then it also said, if it didn't fit, send it back. I'm not. If it doesn't fit, I'm not sending it back. I might drive it back. I think I'll just go to a jewelry in town.
Exactly. Have it sized. Have it properly sized on your own.
So that was a nice gesture by them.
So you wrapped up your professional career in the WHA with the Winnipeg Jets. First as a player.
No, I actually, I wrapped it up, and I went 2 years in Cleveland.
Oh, that's right. You were in Cleveland with they were the Crusaders.
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 Yeah.
Then you wind up in Winnipeg with the Jets. Now that was sort of the latter days of the WHA, right? It was, or were you there at the beginning?
Sure, I was there the second year. The first year, I got 3 invitations to. I could have went to New York Islanders and played with Potvin. I could have went to Ottawa, where Billy Harris was coaching down there, and my partner Marcel Protovo was in Chicago, and I think I belonged to Chicago's on their list of the World Hockey League.
Okay.
And but some of these, when I went in to sign with Imlach, we were training in St. Catharines, and he said, "Did you get any notifications from the World Hockey League?" And I said, "Well, not really. I got a couple there that talk." And then I had one telegram in there that in my box that was sent right after the season finished in Buffalo, and I never received it. But the following year, I only signed 1 year contract for 18 straight years in the National. Yeah, nobody hardly ever signed more than 1 year.
So that was the standard back then.
That was the standard back then.
And that's how ownership held the hammer over your guys' heads.
They held the hammer because they had, when you played with Toronto, they had the Rochester Americans, American League. They had Central League, Tulsa, and then they had Charlotte, North
Carolina.
Carolina.
Have 3 or 4 teams.
Yeah, so you would get 80 guys, 85 guys coming to training camp. So when they only carried 5 defensemen back then, we only carried 5, and we were only playing with 18 players. So to be that, like it was Stanley and Horton, Brewer and Bond, and they were excellent pairing.
Yeah.
And then there was the 5th defenseman if somebody was hurt, penalty or a power play or something like that. So as that come about, they could force you to sign because they would say, "Oh, if you don't sign, we got Al Arbor, we got Ken Douglas."
That's right.
And I had my shoulder dislocated and tied in too tight, so that's how I got out of a regular spot with the Leafs. On that. And then I just worked on it. But they didn't help you even with your physiotherapy. I went to the Y and worked on my own.
You're on your own for physiotherapy?
Yeah, I got the okay to play January the 2nd. I went down to Rochester. I lived with Jim Pappen and Mike Donaldson. They had an extra bedroom there. And every time a TV commercial came by, I went on the floor and got to where I could do 50 push-ups, every time a commercial. So
now, a lot of the young fans today, and when I say young, it's like anybody under about 40, I consider young. They don't know about the 6-team league.
No,
they don't know about the American Hockey League. They don't know about the Central Hockey League. They don't know about the Eastern League and whatnot. When there was a period of time when you were trying to establish yourself as an NHLer, where you were bouncing back and forth between the AHL and the NHL. What was the difference between the 2 leagues? How big of a difference was there? And could the best AHL team
could have beat Boston or New York
and made the playoffs in the 16 league?
Yes, the team we had in Rochester, we had Jerry Cheevers in the net, and Al Arbor and myself that were NHLers. We had Jerry Eman. We had Stamkowski down there, Jim Pappen, Ed Litzenberger. We had a pretty powerhouse team, and that's why we won the cup in Rochester. But that's when these teams had the monopoly over here, when they had 83, 87 players coming to training camp, and the top 18 made it, and they would, the last, say, 3rd and 4th line, they would get them as cheap as they can, because they say, well, they put the pressure on it. Well, if you don't sign,
I got 3 more guys.
Guys will sign. So they give you a lot of 2-way contracts. Let's say you got 12,000 up in Toronto and 5,500 playing in the American League. Right.
Now, when the WHA came into being, What did that do for not the superstar player, not the Bobby Hulls that went and signed $1 million contracts and whatnot, the Derek Sandersons and whatnot? What did that do for guys like yourself?
It was very simple. They were offering you whatever you made in the NHL, they were doubling it.
They were doubling it.
So it didn't take my education in elementary public school. I knew that 2 and 2 made 4, and if they doubled it, then I was going to make twice as much. And that was the reason I jumped to Cleveland.
Wow.
I was making $29.5 in Buffalo. Imlach was going to offer me a 10% raise, which I didn't mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this 9 acres in Vineland that I was living in that area, so it was ideal. The only thing I asked for is that I wouldn't be traded.
Yeah.
And he said, if I can trade you and best for the hockey club, I'll trade you. So I said, okay. So I went to dinner with Jerry Cheevers and my brother Wayne in Buffalo. The general manager came in from Cleveland, and he just asked me, what are you making? I said, I'm making $30,000. He says, well, we'll just double it to 60. I said, that's simple mathematics. I said goodbye punch and left them at the boards, and I went.
Was that the easiest contract negotiation of your career?
It certainly was. I never had, I don't know, because they had you over the basket or, all the time. You'd go into at training camp up in Peterborough, you'd go in there and there'd be the King Clancy and Bob Davison, the head scout, and maybe a secretary or something like that, and the 4 of them more or less gang up on you type of thing. And I remember the story that Al Arbor told me about signing with Chicago with Tommy Ivan. He was in the room talking with Al back and forth and writing down when Al said this and that, and writing down. And so then he got a phone call in the adjoining room, so he went to take the phone call. So Al got up and took the paper and turned it around. It was all scribbling. There was 1 note on it. So you knew what he was getting. He was going to get whatever Chicago offered him. That was what it, So no, it was tough.
So we talked about one record they can never take away from you, being the youngest player to have his name engraved on the Stanley Cup. One of the other things, not quite as radical as that, but a rookie pro head coach wins a league championship. You won the Avco Cup as the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets in your rookie season as a head coach.
Yes.
You and I were talking before we started this whole ordeal, and we can only come up with a handful of guys that can make that claim. So that's pretty exclusive company you're in right there too.
Yes, it is. But I look at my background, and I felt that I was into my 22nd year as a player, and playing with, like I told you earlier, Detroit, Toronto, and Montreal.
Who's who?
I had a good outlook of who should be playing and what lines and all that. I mean, there were times I had to ask Bobby Hull to come off a little earlier because he wanted to go for another rush up, and then my next line, the left winger would never get on because Bobby would stay on. I'd say, Bobby, get off so somebody else, you're screwing up my whole system here. But that's how it was back then.
With players making money now, that time, comparatively speaking to the NHL, you as a coach, did you have the same power over them that the NHL coaches may have?
No, everybody, I was like 38, 39. I blew out my knee in Cleveland, and I got my shoulder tied in, so I knew that I couldn't play anymore. So I just signed a 2-year contract with Winnipeg because I knew the players and I played with them, and so that worked out well for me. But what was your question again? Did you say?
Differences with players making money. Yeah. Differences in the power a coach would have over his players.
I think the elite coaches would have some power over, but at that time, all the players were making twice as much as me, as coaching. So you didn't have that, but it was the security that I get 2 more years of coaching in, and so that was one of the reasons that I took it. But today, like when you take the star coaches that are still coaching, they're making like $5 million, and then they have long-term contracts. And
they have
like Toronto, So they have a little bit more security than some of maybe the lesser known, the bottom 10. See, they've gone to 20 players now where we only played with 18 on that.
In your 22 years as a player, what coach did you most enjoy playing for?
Well, when I won the Eddie Shore Award in Providence with Johnny Crawford, I think Johnny Crawford might even been up in the Kirkland Lake area, but Johnny Crawford, he was such an easygoing coach, you know, like it was really enjoyable playing for him. And I played with my older brother on defense. And my older brother Floyd, Bud is his nickname, and we had close to 300 minutes in penalties, and the only thing that was the matter of that is he was always shooting his mouth off, and then I had to come in and finish the job. That was the only thing. But no, I had an excellent year. But he was an easy coach to play for. I think Imlach was a very smart coach. He just didn't know how to handle players. He knew how to pick up, like Alan Stanley came off New York when he was at the end of his career and played 10 more years. He knew how to pick up veteran players, and like he got Red Kelly. He was all smart in that. It's just that he was like an army guy, regiment, do only as I say, and that's it, you know. And he had problems with just about the whole team. There was only a handful of guys that he didn't, you know, get in conflict with, and you could talk to them all like some of the trades he made. Like me, I just won the Cup at 30 years old with Toronto, and he protected Marcel Ponovo at 37-38 just because he was mad at me. You know, I mean, this is common sense, eh? The guy's 37-38, how long is he going to play?
Yeah.
And I was 30 and just won the Cup.
Just won the Cup in the prime of your career.
And Marcel and I, in the 12 games we played, 6 against Chicago and 6 against Montreal, we were on for 1 goal at even strength.
Wow.
Like, you know, how could you be better than that?
Exactly.
And then I played the power play. So I ended up between the last few games, Marcel and I were starting every period of every game. I was playing the power play and killing penalties, and I never got a penalty in the 12 games. Why would you get a penalty against Bobby Hall and Makita or Jean Bellevue and Cornwall? Like, you know, just use your head.
Use your head. If you want to win, stay out of the box.
That's right, you know. But I was still forceful enough that I'd take Fergie out in front of the net and things like that. But, I mean, if you got a tripping penalty, accidental or something, that's, you know, you can't do anything about it.
Can't do anything about it, exactly.
But this hooking in...
No need for that.
No need for it, you know.
You look at today's game, do you like it? I'm always interested in a former player's opinion because it's not the same game you played.
Well, we all know that they're bigger, stronger. The sticks,
the composite sticks, and everybody shoots at 100 miles an hour.
The equipment, you know, like everything is geared for speed and strength, and they train year round. Why wouldn't you? And you can make $6 million.
Exactly.
Can you make that as a doctor, a dentist, or you know, and a good pension and all that? So the whole thing that since I coached and played against the European hockey players, we had 9 Swedish and 2 Finnish, and we trained in Helsinki, Finland, and Stockholm, Sweden, and Prague, Czechoslovakia for a month.
Okay.
So I was aware of the talent that Hedberg, Nielsen, these players had. I remember one incident, I passed the puck up to Bert Olmsted, and it was in his feet or something. And he come back and says, pass the damn puck on my stick. And I says, well, it was a hurry, I just passed it up to you. So when I was in Winnipeg as a player, and Hedberg says, just hit me with the puck. I don't care if you hit me in the ass or where.
Just get it close.
Just get it close, and I'll kick it up because they were soccer oriented.
Exactly.
So you could see that the European players were more fundamentally talented than the North America. When we came up with Detroit in the old days, make it to center ice, shoot it in, go in and bang bodies, throw it out in front to the score, you know. So that was a change. The big thing I think that definitely they should have, once they started building new arenas, they all should have went to Olympic size. Because that's why the difference of that 10 feet wide over there, our defensemen sometimes have trouble because they'll give the guy the boards, but the boards are 5 feet farther over, and you can't give them you can't get over too far.
If
then
you
he'll
go
cut,
chase them, you're in trouble.
He'll cut you inside.
Yeah.
And so, but they were money hungry, and they could put anher
Another
rows.
row of seats at $1,000 a ticket.
That's it. So
that's the way it goes.
But that's the thing that I would disagree upon, is that they should have started making them all Olympic size.
I forgot about. I'm glad you mentioned Hedberg and Nielsen and the boys playing in Winnipeg. I forgot about that European influence.
Oh, it was big.
That
Half
the
the
game
team.
changed in the WHA, and then it came to the NHL.
Yes.
Yeah,
We were.
I forgot about that. And you running the Jets, you were one of the big influences.
Yeah,
So
well,
you guys
they-
were heavily European.
Well, actually, Glenn Sather, after he watched us play, he said, we have to gear our teams after Winnipeg. And we were fast skating, puck moving. And this is the way that the Europeans brought it to our, like they get the puck to them. They didn't care where, because if you would hit them, they would put it onto their sticks and not break a stride.
Exactly.
The one other thing that I had very interesting, since I was won the Avco Cup, I was head coach of the All-Star team to play against the Russians in Edmonton, a 3-game series. And my first line was Gretzky, Marty Howe, and Gordie Howe was that I coached. And Gretzky had to come in and say, "Hello, Mr. Hillman." and, and we won all 3 games. And I was one of the first ones that I know of that I had Dave Dryden as my backup goalie on the bench with a stopwatch, and I said, don't let anybody stay on more than 45 seconds, because I played 6 other games against the Russians, 3 in Tokyo and in our own arena. And I said, they go as strong at the first minute as they do the 60.
Yeah.
And I found out when we played in Tokyo, I lost all 3 games, but I was using the Winnipeg Jet team, that my 3rd and 4th line couldn't contend.
Couldn't keep the pace.
Bob, so that was that. But that's what I found about the difference in playing in the World Hockey League. I had the 45-second thing bear down, and everybody's using that
You're
now.
a pioneer in that too?
No, like I was one of the first one, and like I say, Sather says that he was going to get his teams to play the same way as the Winnipeg Jets.
So who would have thunk a big old defenseman would revolutionize the way you played offensive hockey?
Well, I was there a long time, so I could see the change was coming on that.
Larry, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you.
Another tale from the Mile of Gold with 6-time Stanley Cup winner, Calder Cup winner, what else? Avco Cup winner.
Cup.
You ever win the Memorial Cup?
No, I moved along too quickly.
You were didn't hang around long enough. Larry Hillman, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.